Talk about Chapter 37. Most of us can't pay equal attention to more than a dozen issues. The time and mental energy are scarce resources, and the typical person then can only focus on about 5 at one time. The small set of issues that's most important to you at a moment is your personal agenda. If we take the average of those concerns across an entire community, state, nation, or even just our class, that would form the public agenda, the set of issues most salient across a group of people at a given time. The degree of importance that the news media assigns to issues at a given moment is the media agenda. The basic hypothesis of this theory is that over time, the media agenda shapes the public agenda. Researchers have amassed decades of evidence that documents the power of the press to shape our reality. They found that agenda setting occurs in 3 ways, or levels. Level 1, what topics are important. Level 2, which attributes are important. And level 3, which issues go together. McCombs wondered if, over time, the public agenda came to reflect the media agenda, such that we judge as important what the media judge as important. In opposition to then current wisdom that mass communication had limited effects upon its audience, Theodore White came to the conclusion that the media shaped election campaigns. Walter Lippmann claimed that the media act as a mediator between the world outside and the pictures in our heads. What set McCombs and Shaw apart is that they put these hunches to empirical test. McCombs and Shaw first tested their theory with undecided voters in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. McCombs and Shaw's first task was to measure the media agenda. They established position and length of story as the 2 main criteria of prominence in stories in local print and broadcast news. With the media agenda measured, their next task was to assess the public agenda. McCombs and Shaw asked undecided voters to outline what each one considered the key issue of the campaign, regardless of what the candidates might be saying. The initial Chapel Hill study only demonstrated that the media and public agendas were correlated. A true test had to be able to show that the public priorities lagged behind the media agenda. It took a tightly controlled experiment run by Yale researchers to establish a cause and effect chain of influence from the media agenda to the public agenda. This study was the first of many studies to offer strong evidence that the media agenda causes which stories are salient to the public agenda, the first level of agenda setting. The first level of agenda setting demonstrates that media tells us what to think about. But do they also tell us how to think about it? For the first 2 decades of agenda setting research, the accepted answer was no. For a long time, almost every article about the theory included this mantra: the media aren't very successful in telling us what to think, but they are stunningly successful in telling us what to think about. But then scholars realized that by emphasizing certain attributes of issues over other attributes, the media do more than just make topics salient. The second level of agenda setting is the transfer of salience from a dominant set of attributes that the media associate with an attitude to a specific feature of an image projected on the walls of our minds. Some scholars call this selection process framing. One of the lead writers on mass communication theory defines a media frame as the central organizing idea for news content that supplies a context and suggests what the issue is through the use of selection, emphasis, exclusion, and elaboration. The press frame people too, especially political figures. It's impossible to report stories without emphasizing certain attributes over others. For better or worse, framing isn't optional. In most studies, the voter's agenda mirrors the media's agenda in substance, the first level, and in tone, the second level. But object salience and attribute framing aren't the end of the story. The media communicates issues as though they are an interconnected web, with some connections stronger than others. Like framing, These kinds of connections aren't optional. Even where a story is placed on a web page or in a newscast might establish such connections. The third level of agenda setting then examines how the media's issue map influences the public's issue map. Most of the research studies on agenda setting have measured the effect of media agendas on public opinion. McCombs presented several intriguing findings showing that media priorities also influence people's behaviors. Areas of practical application include coverage of the flu and vaccinations, university enrollment when high crimes are reported, and decreased plane ticket sales after skyjacking reports. Savvy marketers can also use agenda-setting effects to promote their business products. Agenda-setting research has gathered strong evidence that the media agenda influences the public agenda. But this begs the question, what then shapes the media agenda? So far, research has identified several sources that journalists rely on to decide what counts as news, such as other news organizations. When one news source influences the agenda of another, that's intermedia agenda setting. Emerging media can break a story that then gets picked up by mainstream sources. Partisan media, such as political talk radio and websites, also hold influence. Candidates and other office holders can sometimes single-handedly set the agenda, and press releases from public relations professionals can repackage the news. Interest aggregations, referring to a cluster of people who demand center stage for their issue, can also influence the agenda. And gatekeepers, like editors, ultimately decide what gets published. Disturbingly, fake news appeared to exert at least some influence on the agenda of more credible news organizations. McCombs and Shaw suspected that some viewers might be more resistant to the media's priorities than others. The key factor they discovered is our need for orientation. It represents a drive to make sense of the world around us, to orient our understanding of it. For some people, need for orientation is an internal drive that motivates them no matter the issue. McCombs believes that both relevance and uncertainty lead us to have a need for orientation on a particular issue. McCombs and Shaw's agenda-setting theory has found an appreciative audience among mass communication researchers because it offers two attractive features. It reaffirms the power of the press while maintaining that individuals are free to choose. More than before, there isn't one dominant media agenda that descends from the boardrooms of East Coast media establishments. Multiple media agendas exist, and we can choose from among them. McCombs and Shaw suggest that we can make sense of the media landscape if we sort outlets into two types. One type is vertical media. They try to appeal to a broad, diverse audience, including USA Today, Times, Newsweek, and nightly news broadcasts like ABC, NBC, and CBS. In contrast, horizontal media usually connect us via valued special interest and personal interest communities. They appeal to niche audiences like Fox News, MSNBC, partisan talk shows, magazines related to hobbies or industries, and many sources of news on social media. Agenda-setting theorists believe that we assemble our view of current events from these media and our own experiences. They call this agenda melding, or the social process by which we meld agendas from various sources, including other people, to create pictures of the world that fit our experiences and preferences. It's a social process because agenda melding creates communities, and people like to spend time with people who think like they do. An advantage of the digital news environment is that diverse people can speak about public issues and perhaps have their voices heard. Yet, the very technology that connects us can also allow us to separate into our own isolated agenda melding communities. When compared to the standards for evaluating an objective theory, agenda-setting theory fares well. Study after study has demonstrated the theory's ability to explain the data about agendas, not only in the United States, but elsewhere. That's because carefully constructed quantitative research on the theory's testable hypotheses has conducted over time and through experiments has built a strong case for the order of causation. The theory also remains relatively simple. To any company, candidate, or celebrity who cares what the media are saying about them, The theory is practically useful. An agenda setting theory is a good model for what an objective theory should be. The biggest challenge to today's longevity might be the digital era, foreseen by McLuhan and other scholars. McCombs didn't seem to think that the digital age changed agenda setting all that much, but studies in the traditional mold of agenda setting may miss the point. Every time you visit social media or use a search engine, an algorithmic gatekeeper filters the information and decides what you see. This filtering is often on the basis of a number of personal factors. So what exactly does social media agenda mean when it's tailored so specifically to the user, precisely that it arises from the user's own preferences?